Hi, everybody. So today we are going to talk about the Great Depression and the New Deal. And in this video, I'm going to do a little PowerPoint for you, just so we can go over some basic images and ideas. See if I can, there we go. So when you think of the Great Depression, we often think of it starting in 1929, right? October of 1929, the crash of the stock market, all that drama that we all know about from our school days. And that's obviously right. The formal start of the Depression is considered October of 1929. The end of it is kind of one of those wishy-washy points in time. At what point do you say the Depression is over? It ends sometime during World War II, when the United States gets mobilized for the war. But the general start of it is recognized as fall of 1921. The reality is always more complicated than that. When you think about history and everything we've talked about in this class so far, the reality is always going to be a little more complicated than that simple version we learn in school. And in truth, there were many sick industries during the 1920s, these aspects of the economy that were not doing well, and that the people who were paying attention, economists and even some political scientists, but they were looking at these industries saying, this isn't a good thing. This isn't a good thing. So some of those industries are going to include agriculture, which we're going to talk about more in depth. Another sick industry is the steel industry. Think about when we talked about the Industrial Revolution, we talked about how the steel industry was the real backbone of the American industry. In the American Industrial Revolution. Steel is in decline, in part because railroad is this other industry that's in decline in the 1920s. The railroad, which had been so important to the expansion of industry across the country throughout the late 19th and early 20th century, is in decline by the 1920s, in part because the automobile is around. People aren't taking the trains as much. They've already built all the tracks they need, which is partly why steel is down. And the automobile just doesn't use as much steel as trains do. So there's all sorts of these big industries that are hurting. There's lots of smaller industries as well, the trolley car industry and things like that are hurt by the automobile. But the one I'm going to focus on for us today, and we could go through all of them, but the one I'll really focus on is agriculture, because this was such an important part of the American economy and the American kind of way of life, the way America thought of themselves as these two worlds, rural and urban, and agricultural and industrial. And this agricultural side is really important. So one of the things that happens as World War I is going on, we're going to back up a little, because I always back up. You got to understand a little bit before you get there. So one of the things that goes on with World War I, as Europe is being devastated and torn apart, and the bombing and the fighting and all of this and millions of men at war, it means their agricultural industry is not doing well, right? They're just not out in the fields farming. And even if they could be, the fields are torn up into trenches. So they're just not growing the crops they need, which means the American farmers have a much bigger market that they can sell to. So that supply and demand, the supply is low and the demand is very high. So American farmers see this as an opportunity. The prices are up, over $2 a bushel for wheat and things like that. So they're going to buy more land. Of course, they're going to borrow money to buy that land, but it's a gamble, but they're going to do it. They're going to buy all this new land. And then we talk a lot about the automobile in the 1920s as this great new thing. But think about the reality that you also have tractors and new industry or new technology available for farmers. So these are just some pictures of the different farmers' opportunities where they can plow so many more acres. This one says one man cultivates 12 to 20 acres in 10 hours. Instead of using horses, they're using this gas-powered tractors and threshers and different equipment like this. Here's just another one. I like this picture in particular. Let me move myself out of the way there, because it shows some of the different technology. This is kind of an old steam-powered tractor looking thing, and this is the horses that are being used, and then very modern looking trucks. And again, more horses. So this great mix of technology that is going to be used by farmers. But this farm machinery sales hit new high. Everybody wants to buy a new tractor. And then once everybody buys tractors, even if you're conservative with your money or you don't want to go into debt, you have to in order to compete. So it's really this strange catch-22. Right. Then you have a real problem in the agricultural sector. You can see here in 1920, the prices of wheat, and this is just one example of a crop. The wheat prices get up to $2.96 a bushel. And this is a lot compared to what it had been before. But by 1925, it's dropped by over half. And the reason that's occurred is because the European market has started to recover. Their fields, they're starting to farm again. They're starting to figure it out. They're starting to put tariffs on American goods coming into Europe to encourage people to buy French wheat instead of American wheat. And so the prices are going to drop. And then by 1930, you can see even how much lower they are, 66 cents. Huge drop. The reality, of course, is that the debt that these farmers all accrued when they could count on $2.96 a bushel is not going away. So you've got this huge level of debt for these farmers, and prices just aren't gonna be sustainable. So they're in a lot of trouble in this way. And this is just another example, just so you can see the decline in the prices on these different products. So here's corn. This is where it was in 1912 and 1913, and it's down to 1920. So the point of this slide, so this one shows what it was at its peak, right? 1920, the World War I is over. People are back in the cities in Europe, especially Americans are back at work, but the European farmers aren't in place. What this chart shows us is that the prices fell even further than the pre-World War I prices, right? Even those prices that were in place before that kind of artificial temporary peak, they dropped substantially. Look at the hogs, they're down by half. Milk is down by half. Wool is down by half from a decade before. So even if farmers hadn't gone in debt, even if farmers had been, conservative with, buying the fields or buying the tractors, their prices are still half. So this is going to be just devastating to American farmers, who we'll talk about more later on. Right. So you've got this very sick industry, and this is going to be an important part of the American economy. Right? Now, one other aspect, and this isn't really an industry, but it's going to help complicate things and make the Great Depression even deeper than it necessarily was going to be or could have been. And this is the reality that you've got this mass consumer debt in the 1920s. Now, we talked about this some when we talked about the 1920s, had those lectures, but the reality is that, you've got all this stuff, this mass consumerism we talked about that Americans are buying into. You've got these automobiles and all these ads for cars and cars on credit and how many you can buy. And here's one of those toasters, right? This is a pretty fancy dancy toaster for the day, right? The turnover toaster. So you could buy your toaster, but then you have those other technologies, the electric vacuum cleaner, because we've got more electricity that's available, more electricity that's going into homes in the 1920s. Then you can have electric equipment and electric products in your home, like vacuum cleaners, which is going to, of course, make expectations for cleanliness in the home. Instead of really making life easier for women, then expectations actually go up higher on cleanliness and things like that. But people are going into debt for these things. See, look, this one over here is for an Underwood typewriter, right? This is, you know, a way to write letters and be efficient. $3 down and it's yours, right? It's like today when they say, you know, come buy a car and, oh, it's only $250 a month, right? You can afford that payment. They don't tell you what the whole price is and that you're going to spend 6 years paying that $250 a month, right? Always look at the total price, not just the monthly payment, right? It's really important. So all of this, these consumer products and this keeping up with the neighbors, that kind of thing is really a big part of it. So when the economy does crash in the 1920s, people are going to be more in debt and less able to weather those storms that are coming. Okay. One other piece that I want to talk about before we go too far is this on margin buying in the stock market. And I think I will save that for the next video. I think I've got to stop that share. Okay. So I will stop this and then we'll break it up for the next video.